In the summer of 1560, if you had asked a merchant anywhere in Europe where the money was, he would have told you Antwerp. Not Rome, not Venice, not London. A city in the Low Countries sitting on a bend of a muddy river, where roughly 1,000 foreign traders lived permanently and 2,000 ships a year came up the Scheldt to unload. Walk its streets with me and you will smell pepper and tar and beer. Hear 5 languages before you reach the end of one road, and watch a man from Lisbon sell a chest of Indian spice to a man from Augsburg who pays with silver mined in Bohemia. What you would not be able to see, standing there in the noise and the money, is that this same city has 16 years left before 3 days in November tear it apart and hand its fortune to Amsterdam forever. Start where the wealth came in. Antwerp had no gold mine and no empire. What it had was a river deep enough for seagoing ships and a ruler willing to let anyone trade. Portugal moved its northern spice depot here, which meant the pepper of India arrived in Antwerp before it arrived almost anywhere else in Europe. The German bankers followed the pepper. English cloth merchants followed the bankers. By the 1540s, about 40% of the world's trade was passing through this one town, and the population had more than doubled in a lifetime to around 100,000 souls, packed inside walls built for far fewer. That crowding is the first thing you would notice. Houses grew upward because there was nowhere else to grow. Narrow brick fronts 4 and 5 stories high with stepped gables like staircases into the sky, leaning over lanes so tight that neighbors could pass a jug across the gap. The ground floor was a shop. The floors above were family, servants, apprentices, and lodgers, and the attic was stock. A prosperous merchant's house held 20 people and a warehouse under one roof, and the smell of the goods was the smell of the home. The rhythm of the day began before light. Church bells and the city's carillon set the whole town's clock, and everyone worked to bells. You ate a first meal of bread and beer standing up, because the water was not safe and beer was what people drank all day. Weak stuff, several liters of it, children included. Work ran from dawn until the evening bell. The main meal came at midday, and it was heavier than you would expect. Rye and wheat bread, butter, cheese, herring salted in barrels from the North Sea, peas and beans, cabbage, turnips, and if you were doing well, beef or mutton. What made an Antwerp table different from any other in Europe was the shelf behind it. Sugar, pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves. Elsewhere, those were medicine for the rich. Here, they came off the docks by the ton, and even ordinary households cooked with a hand of spice that would have looked like showing off in Paris. The heart of it all was a building that had never existed anywhere before. In 1531, the city opened the new exchange, a great courtyard ringed with covered galleries, and carved above the entrance the words that it was built for the merchants of all nations and all languages. It was the first purpose-built commercial stock exchange in the world, and London copied it wholesale 40 years later. Twice a day, on the bell, 2,000 or 3,000 men crowded that courtyard and made deals on nothing but a word and a handshake. There was no bank chamber, no contract signed on the spot. A merchant's promise was traded like currency, and men bought cargoes still at sea and sold them again before the ship arrived. Real money changed hands in bills of exchange, paper written in one city and honored in another, which is the ancestor of every check and wire transfer that has ever followed. That world was not open to everyone. Beneath the traders in furred gowns lived thousands of dockers, coopers, rope makers, carters, and the women who ran the market stalls. And a good deal of the city could not have told you where its next winter's rent was coming from. There were begging licenses and orphan houses, and a poor board that handed out bread. And when the harvest failed and grain prices doubled, the same port that made the merchants rich fed the poor last. Disease moved through the tight lanes exactly as you would expect it to. Antwerp was the richest city on earth, and a great many of the people in it were hungry. And it was fragile in a way almost nobody in that courtyard admitted. The whole fortune rested on one river and one arrangement. The Scheldt stayed open, and Antwerp's Spanish rulers stayed tolerant. Both were about to fail. Through the 1560s, religion split the city between Catholics and a large, wealthy Protestant population. And in 1566, crowds went through the churches, smashing the statues and the painted altarpieces. Spain sent an army. Then Spain went bankrupt twice, and by the autumn of 1576, the Spanish soldiers garrisoned in the citadel had not been paid in months. On the 4th of November, 1576, they mutinied and came into the city. What followed is remembered in Dutch and English alike as the Spanish Fury. For 3 days, unpaid soldiers burned, killed, and looted street by street through the richest town in Europe. The new town hall, barely 15 years old, went up in flames. Around 1,000 houses burned. Something close to 7,000 or 8,000 people were killed in a city of 100,000. And the money and plate that had made Antwerp famous went out of the gates in soldiers' packs. Merchants who survived did the only rational thing and left, and they took their ledgers, their credit networks, and their contacts with them. The killing blow came 9 years later. In 1585, Antwerp fell to the Spanish again after a long siege, and the Dutch, who held the mouth of the river downstream, simply closed the Scheldt. A city whose entire existence depended on ships coming up that channel now had no ships. Its population fell by more than half within a few years. The traders, the bankers, and the Protestant craftsmen went north to a smaller town on marshy ground that had been nobody's idea of a capital. And Amsterdam spent the next century as the richest city in the world, using Antwerp's people and Antwerp's methods. So if you stand again on that exchange floor in 1560, in the noise of 2,000 men shouting prices in 5 languages under the finest roof in Europe, what you are really looking at is a city that had built everything on a river it did not control and a peace it did not own. The wealth was real. The pepper was real. And every one of those merchants was one mutiny and one blockade away from being a refugee. Antwerp did not decline slowly. It was the center of the world, and then in the space of a single generation, it was a quiet provincial town with beautiful empty houses, which is what it stayed for the next 200 years. If this walk through the past was worth your time, consider subscribing and stay with me, because there is always another century waiting.